we've got ourselves a very curious situation here. Mercedes have made the best engine, at least for now, and their longest serving customers aren't being able to cash in on that. I mean, what gives? And if McLaren really can't pull their act together, it could actually end up costing them maybe more than just points. One preconception we all had was that if you got yourself a Merc power unit in the back of your car, you'd be in good shape from the off. So far, that hasn't really happened across the board. I mean, unless you're Alpine, of course. I mean, I can't imagine why. And no, I don't think this is Toto cackling in the garage or something like that, flipping a secret switch every time a customer gets ideas above their station. Nah, I don't see Toto just doing that and going, this is what you get, Zach, for beating us 2 years in a row. Because indeed, McLaren have been spending the last 2 years in a row beating their suppliers, after they beat their suppliers when they had Renault multiple years in a row. And whilst Toto's group took it on the chin and actually lauded that in their social media feeds, the reality is that now in 2026, the rules have changed, that it's no longer McLaren having the best time of it. When you look to McLaren and indeed Williams, they do appear rattled. And in the case of James Vowles' team, their hope that P5 in the Constructors would be their baseline going forward remains just that. Maybe this is just the way things lie at the beginning of a regulation cycle, or maybe it might be simply down to the fact that Mercedes might have a better understanding of what they have to provide their customers. And it's really speaking out to the paddock narrative. Everyone, including the fans, just going, how on earth are these guys so strong? Because as I touched upon last week, McLaren have been left exposed at the beginning of the 2026 season. They're not down and out completely, but when it comes to laying down the foundation for the season ahead, these foundations are still as goopy as wet cement. The house they built since Miami 2024, it's not exactly crumbled, but it's taken a big hit. Papaya rules, for now, Ferrari drivers haven't needed them. That much-vaunted seat at the table Zak Brown proclaimed they had with Mercedes, that seat doesn't look nearly as comfortable now. Yeah, McLaren are third in the Constructors, and Red Bull have got an even worse time with their car, but McLaren is still 80 points behind Mercedes, and Lando only has 15 of them, Oscar only 3, after failing to complete a single Grand Prix lap so far this season. That's a horrible way to begin a title defense at the start of a regulation cycle. Because this is the exact point you need to have trust in your car and build a rhythm throughout an entire weekend. So far, they haven't gotten that. I mean, save for Lando in Australia. They did learn quite a few things, but when you compare it to their rivals, they learnt nearly 4 times as much in the same period. And you just get the sense that when it comes to this project around the MCL40, McLaren just don't have control right now. Even if they do get their act together and they are able to start races and collect some points, the damage has partly been done already. They have lost important race mileage that even Aston Martin has been able to manifest. Aston Martin! And through Oscar Piastri's eyes, the start has been nothing short of brutal. Throughout 2025, you took what happened on the chin, and his own summation of the entire thing was, oh well, I had a fair shot. Maybe 2026 will afford the same thing. Well, I mean, so far this year it's not really been a fair shot. Instead, his entire title aspirations have been shot. The confidence he had that this year would be the same in terms of opportunity was reflected in the fact that he got that long-term extension he signed in Melbourne last year, much like the one that was given to Lando the year before. Belief in the driver from McLaren, and a warning to everyone else to keep their distance, and instead of that, Piastri's left coping through morbid Instagram posts. Hi, I'm Oscar Piastri. I sometimes drive McLaren F1 cars. Now, there's no sign Oscar's about to pack his bags and leave the team tomorrow, but McLaren will absolutely want his camp to see that they are not standing around punching at air over this, that they're not going to be taking this lying down. A driver like Oscar, he could probably live with a little bit of bad luck. In fact, well, I mean, look what happened last year. The fact that Oscar looked so unflappable despite everything around him, and Drive to Survive being able to smooth over the ugly sides of papaya rules, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to put up with absolutely everything. What he won't want to feel in a brand new regulation cycle is that he hasn't got the momentum to build upon it. As I've said in many videos, in those early days, you want, as a driver, to be the baseline in terms of development. You need that mileage, and if you don't have it, you don't learn much about the car, and the guy in the other cockpit is learning more than you. If Oscar does not get this time back and show that he can maximise the fact that in terms of qualifying, he is 2-0 ahead of Lando, then Norris is still going to take the cake. All because his team can't get on top of something that has been afforded them by the supplier, and they've been left completely dumbfounded as to why they simply cannot understand this platform after years of understanding it and maximising it. Stella saying that throughout all of the time they've been supplied by Mercedes since the MCL35M, they have not had this many headaches. And Stella indeed has admitted that all of this must be really hard for Oscar to process. And in a formula that is this dependent on electrical behaviour, the driver really needs to trust the car, that it's going to do what it wants it to do. Especially considering that all of this, the learning of these 2026 spec of F1 machinery, has required some drivers to completely unlearn the things they'd learned since their days in karting. That quote coming from Oscar specifically. If that trust isn't there, like we've seen with Max Verstappen in not having the faith in the RB22 to be able to use the battery effectively, the car's rear locking out on him unexpectedly in Melbourne, and then bogging down at the start throughout deployment issues and battery depletion, then he's only going to be left feeling angrier and angrier, and indeed lashing out at, I think, the wrong people. And as a team, you're effectively asking your driver to attack the race with one eye left half open, as in like, I think I got it. So what's going on here? Well, as Toto recently said, he can already sense the political knives sharpening toward him. We've just had the compression ratio row, and now this. This is where things get interesting though. The FIA rules say customer power units from one manufacturer must be identical on paper, run with identical control software, and be capable of being operated in the same way. Customer teams must also be given the operating conditions and limits and information needed to install and run the power unit as intended. Those are pretty ironclad. But, as I've read from Adrian Newey's book, there are many people within Formula One and Formula One teams who are paid specifically to look through the rulebooks and find out the wording that is going down with the FIA. Is it completely bulletproof, or is it open to interpretation? Or are there some opportunities that you could be afforded that are still strictly legal, but are very, very sneaky or very, very clever? I'm making this very clear. Mercedes have indeed provided the teams identical hardware. There is no denying that. Instead, it might be down to the software as to whether or not it's detailed enough for the customer teams to be able to get into that power unit and really tap into its full potential in terms of all sorts of variables. You know, to try and make sure that that power unit can absolutely sing in the way that it's affording George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. If you want to continue the singing analogy, it's like McLaren, Williams and Alpine have been handed the same book that Mercedes is singing from, but they're trying to find the exact song that Mercedes is even singing, and whether or not they can actually try and interpret the musical notes. That, to me, is where the story really lives. Okay, what could be these technicalities and loopholes law? Well, it all goes down to the Technical Regulations Section C. They are publicly available on the FIA's website. I suggest you sit down for a couple of hours and go through them if you want. Because when it comes to things that power unit suppliers have to supply and don't have to supply, they are very much cut and dry. They are included or they are excluded. In that current edition of the technical aspect, I direct you to item 94, which is excluded from having to be identical. That being thus. Ahem. Garage IT equipment, data connection to factory, servers, telemetry, radio, team clothing, and all garage equipment identified by the power unit manufacturer as not strictly necessary for the operation of the power unit. So according to the FIA rulebook, you could give a customer team the same box, the same control software, and the same legal baseline, all while keeping the most comprehensive analysis tools and the most advanced interpretation infrastructure to yourself. Now, let me be clear. This is not sabotage on Mercedes' part, because, well, what did I just point out from the FIA's own documents? In a way, though, it's actually kind of worse. Because if this had been during the turbo hybrid era still, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal, because all the teams by that point, 2025, knew the regulations inside and out. And also, software and electrical behaviour was only 20% of the widget. But this is the beginning of a cycle where energy management is now 50-50. At least for the time being. Sure, in time, the combustion engine might take the front seat again from the battery, but for now, the battery is still more important than it was just a few months ago. All the stuff to do with the battery, that is controlled by the car's ECU. That's the electronic control unit. Its job to try and interpret and understand how the car harvests and deploys its own power over the course of a single lap, and in some cases throughout an entire race. which in a way contributes to the argument that people have that F1's become too artificial. The Guardian's reporting on Mercedes' early edge points in the same direction, saying Mercedes appear to have mastered the energy management side better than their rivals and even their customers. So when people ask whether this could be about software, yeah, Toto made it very clear during the off-season that conquering the software of these cars was paramount. That's why he was so glazing the Microsoft deal that his team had been able to accrue. And yeah, pinching them from Alpine, by the way, who have been working with Microsoft for yonks at this point, yikes. It's a case of give and take, as in, Mercedes has given them their power units, whilst also taking a very crucial sponsor or partner during 2026. Having a slight edge in how your car deploys and harvests energy right now when people are still learning, that's going to be absolutely essential to try and build some forward momentum. Sure, Ferrari might have proven that aerodynamically speaking with the SF26 it might be the faster car in the corners, but when it comes to some graphics stating that down the Straits of China, Mercedes was 0.8 of a second faster, that might not necessarily matter. It might be going back to the days of 2014 where you need the best engine. You don't necessarily have to have the best car in the corners. You just go, Bloof! And that'll do. And then I point you to all of the talk that we found out that for the Mercedes customers around Bahrain testing, they weren't given the same power unit as Mercedes. They had to work with a slightly older spec. But at the time, that was on the grounds of the fact that, well, hey, relax. Everyone's trying to figure out reliability. Mercedes had issues of their own. They want to make sure they're doing the best for their customers. We then find out, oh goody, they're going to be getting the same identical power unit in terms of the hardware for Melbourne. Fantastic. So naturally, come Albert Park, the teams get out their brand new package and thinking, fantastic. They plug it into their own software, which does not have to be supplied by Mercedes or their elements or their workflows. And then they go, now if that was all within contractual boundaries, then fine. I don't know what the contract actually state, but it would underline the wider point that by the time formally equal supply arrives, the works team may already be weeks ahead into understanding how to make the most of the package. So whilst Alpine, McLaren and Williams are busy trying to catch up, for Mercedes, who are right there helping them out, Mercedes HPP, this is all gold dust. You're watching that power unit live inside 3 different chassis, all with different variables and run plans. Your customers are helping you understand the rules even faster. So what these teams are doing are only serving to make Mercedes even stronger. And to these customers, what may look like noise and it might take quite a while to try and pass through, a Mercedes engineer might be looking at that and going, okay, yes, I can immediately report back to base, and then that can be fed into the development for the 2027 power unit. And also, just look at the way McLaren is framing all of this. Sure, Andrea has not resorted to the likes of theatrical accusations or anything like that. They are very much treating this as a very serious situation, that they are launching a joint investigation with Mercedes and McLaren. And, yeah, I'm just going to get the spanner and foam out, and it wouldn't surprise me if Mercedes get back to McLaren saying, nope, no problems here. But what Andrea did say was that the flow of information from Mercedes wasn't what McLaren expected under the new rules. Then China happened, with both McLarens failing to start due to electrical problems related to the power unit, with Piastri explicitly nettled and pointing to those same power unit electronics, having already hinted at power spikes in Australia, which caused him to crash out of his own home race. So as you can imagine, he wouldn't exactly be looking at Mercedes with dewy eyes right now, and Stella knows that. If you're McLaren, you must be sweating buckets right now. Sure, when it comes to the aerodynamic development of the car, as well as all the other engineering gubbins that aren't associated with Mercedes, you could, and I could, have total faith in them being able to make good progress and upgrades. They've done it before. If you remember to the first few races of 2024, before Miami, they were in a similar position as they are now. You know, not the best. They were still getting 4ths and 5ths and 6ths. They made trouble at the podium, but then after Miami, completely different story with that first big package. There are a lot of things within the MCL40 that McLaren can easily control. They don't take as much stuff from Mercedes as Williams and Alpine do. But that powertrain, that is out of your control, and that has left the team extremely vulnerable and taking a bashing when it comes to public relations. And with most of the F1 fandom not really feeling sympathetic to your cause. As had many of you, judging from the comments I was receiving on my video from last week, you're not exactly feeling sympathy for Zach Brown and Andrea Stella right now, although you are joining Oscar Piastri in feeling absolutely twistedly morbid with your situation. He's getting the sympathy, McLaren isn't. And if you're McLaren right now, you really need to be thinking about whether or not this is just simply bad luck or an integration problem or something a little bit untoward, as in you're not getting the full story from your supplier. That the information they're getting is indeed not good enough. But naturally in Formula One, it happens all the time. The best team or the best engine supplier is the target of much scrutiny. As in, if you can't figure out how to actually make things work or improve upon something, what do? You complain to the FIA about it. You put some attention onto that team and go, are you sure they're actually doing that properly? Quite a lot of the time in the early 90s for Ferrari, you complain about it and try and get it removed from another car. Like how we saw with Audi and other manufacturers regarding the compression ratio capacity. They have, everyone, reached a compromise, and new tests will be carried out not from the Dutch Grand Prix, but from the Monaco Grand Prix, which is June 1st. And then further regulation checks toward the engine would be made in due course, said the FIA. Sure, that doesn't prove Mercedes have done anything illegal with customers, but it will mean that rivals, the regulators, and the wider paddock will be keeping a really close eye on them. Remember Christian saying that the higher you rise, the sharper the knives? So when McLaren and Williams both talk about feeling bamboozled as to why they don't understand this engine, and then in the case of the former get hit by electrical failures, these thoughts are being pondered in a season where Mercedes look really assured after years of pain. Terrifyingly assured. You could even bring Ferrari into this, all to do with the FIA's additional development and upgrade opportunity rule. You know, the mechanism that is afforded to teams every 6 races or so. If they are a certain percentage behind the leading pack, they can make certain adjustments depending on certain areas. And if you look to the technical regulations section C, they can't just update things willy-nilly. There is a very strict set of criteria that they can upgrade still related to performance and the like. As the season progresses, you can make fewer and fewer changes until it reaches maturation point in 2030. The ADUO opens up extra criteria, but only 1 or 2 things at a time. They just can't update the whole thing. But that can only be activated if your car is 2% slower, or if your engine is 2% slower than the leading market. And that is leading to many reckoning that Mercedes are holding something back, that they know this could happen. And Ferrari has said, if they can just get their engine improved, they'd be right on Mercedes. So what does Toto's crew do? They slow down. You could then argue that sandbagging at this time when you really need to learn the car's full potential isn't exactly practical, but with Mercedes right now, you never know. And what doesn't help Mercedes is that the FIA's current regulations within Section C tie the ICE Performance Index and ADUO thresholds to the customer teams as well as the works teams. So if Alpine and Williams and McLaren are able to get much more, or all of the Mercedes power unit eventually, that will scupper Mercedes' plans to thwart Ferrari. But still, the fact that the paddock and the fans are looking for clues as to why Mercedes are so quick instead of just accepting they're quick, well, yeah, that is just par for the course. And then I present you this particular speed chart from the Twitter account TrackSims. The most striking thing yet you'll immediately see is that the Mercedes top speed distribution shape looks really small. It looks controlled, and it's also not the fastest. Their customers' shapes look far more varied, with Alpine and Williams even achieving higher top speed. So to me, that proves that Mercedes are not leaving their customers struggling for pure grunt. They're not. I mean, in the case of Alpine, they're able to get at least 10 kilometers an hour more speed. Instead, what Mercedes might have been able to crack with this extra insight is where the sweet spot to do with deployment and harvesting, because if you go at full chat, that's not the mature way to go. You're just screaming, power! In a Clarkson-style way. And considering that Alpine is not far from Clarkson's farm, that certainly makes sense. And given how Alpine has been starved for power for years, being so many horsepower behind one of the slowest teams out there, they want to make the most of the fact that we could be the fastest. But as a result, and with Williams, and with quite a few teams actually, they are not being really sensible when it comes to, well, realizing that, hey, you don't want to go too fast and drain the battery too quick. You might then get that super clipping and then you will be nobbled eventually. Mercedes might know how to keep the perfect level of state lap after lap after lap. That means they can easily fight back in the corners as well. So what I'm trying to get here is that Mercedes have perfected a way to make the engine hardware look identical and perform identically and offer full potential to their customers, but they've managed to hold something back that ensures that that engine can behave properly. Mercedes can do that. That chart is really telling. And trust me, McLaren will have access to charts similar to that, but that are far more granular, far more detailed, and they will be wanting to know that there is something here, and they will be desperate to get to the bottom of this quickly. They will want to know the best way to tap into this engine and how to catch up and make up for lost time, because they've lost a lot of time. I will get the foam up for this bit because we're going to be talking about Alpine here. I mean, just look at what's happening around them, yeah? Mercedes is in talks over buying up Otto Capital's 24% stake in the team. Briatore confirming that yes, the deal is with Mercedes and it's not just with Toto on his lonesome, whilst also playing down the idea that a minority stake means that they will have control. Of course he would say that. This is Flavio Briatore we're talking about here. He's the kingpin of Alpine. Even though the Renault group owns the majority of the team, they have left field T to Flavio. He is the one that calls the shot. Whatever Briatore says, goes. He is not going to say, oh yeah, and it's going to be Toto, and look, I'm just going to do this again. No, he's not going to say that. Come on. Even though, admittedly, I did see him actually enjoying a Disney ride, and that just blew my mind. Flavio having fun. Sure, none of that absolutely categorically proves that something untoward is happening over at Alpine, or they are choosing to be quiet for political reasons, but it is still something you should be really paying attention to, because given how much Williams and McLaren have been left struggling and confused, Alpine have been relatively sorted. They weren't setting the fire in Melbourne, they did score a point, which was handy, but then you get to Shanghai a week later, they get a double points finish for the first time since Brazil 2024. That uptick, whilst not as mighty as McLaren Silverstone 23, is still really, really crucial for Alpine. They're already in double figures. They are not that far behind their total points coverage of 2025. They are a Mercedes customer, yet they've not been riddled with all of this frustration that the other customers have been. And indeed, Mercedes are exploring a stake in the team. So it is just enough to make you then go, what is going on here? But okay, let me be frank. I do not think this is sabotage. I'm just stating that there might be a possibility that Mercedes has managed to find a legal asymmetry that is still in keeping with the rules. Not the hardware itself, absolutely not, because they've been talking with the FIA far too much to be able to do something as sneaky as this. The FIA has been watching them like a hawk regarding this compression ratio saga. In fact, it might make me think that that was a complete red herring and that they just wanted to know absolutely everything from the governing body as to what is allowed and what isn't allowed with these rules, and they managed to find this particular loophole. Equal control software doesn't necessarily mean equal learning or equal interpretation. And when one of your customers has spent the last 2 years embarrassing you, and then you've been embarrassed by Red Bull for 2 years before that, that kind of asymmetry is always going to feel political long before anyone can prove that it is. So what McLaren can't afford to do right now is just shrug this off as, oh, just news cycle chaos, oh, it's just bad luck. Their investigation with Mercedes needs to find out whether they're chasing just a freak problem or something more structural. There is performance in the car. A third row lockout in Shanghai isn't the most fantastic result out there, but it's certainly a really solid base in which to go forward. But they are losing important mileage and understanding, and right now, they could lose even more momentum if they're not careful. And they could lose confidence too. As I said before, I think that this is worse than them just having a slow car, because they know that there is speed within the MCL40. If they can just get everything to work together and shake hands at the right time. And those lost kilometers that their rivals have been able to manifest for themselves will really harm them when it comes to developing their future upgrades, because they won't have that track time. You can argue that, yes, they're off the line, but they're hobbling off the line, whereas Mercedes and even Ferrari are about a dozen or so meters ahead of you. That is the most intriguing thing for me. Not that Mercedes are secretly strangling their customers. Mercedes have built the perfect advantage in the places that the rules can't easily standardize. The mapping, the energy management know-how, the detail in the telemetry, and operational interpretation. I mean, just look what the telemetry, what we've seen, has pointed to. That there are certain things that are not being made publicly available. If that's the case, then what we've got right here is a software power play. And you can use the power of software to move your cursor over here and click on this video to continue my yappage. I'll just go and get myself changed and I'll be right with you.